Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Psychology of a Femcel series. This is where I talk about the Femcel mindset. I know that Femcells don't necessarily exist in the same way that incels do, but when I use that word Femcel, I'm talking about a pick me who never got picked. So I talk a lot about decentering men. I talk about how to tell if a guy's an incel. Well, today we're talking about femcells because I want you to also decenter femcells. I feel like femcel culture, it's a part of medium ugly culture. It's a part of beluga culture. So there's a lot of intersectionality with that. So if you want to be able to tell if your friend or family member is a femcel, just watch how they act. Number one, a femcel will give you disingenuous beauty advice, or she will give you bad beauty advice on purpose to try to sabotage your looks. Have you ever had somebody tell you that you shouldn't lose weight? Maybe you should cut your hair super short. You know, they say that you should shave your head bald and get a whole bunch of piercings because it'll look good on you. And it's like, why is it that the most crusty looking woman, you literally are the crustiest woman of 2026, and you suddenly want to convince me that you're a beauty expert? Suddenly, you want to convince me that you know how to do makeup. I've never seen your makeup slayed, not a day in your life, but then suddenly you want to tell me that I should be doing the smoky eye. I should be doing a red lip. I should be doing this and that with my makeup. That's part of the femcel mindset. She claims to have all the solutions for everybody else. She tells every other woman how to look good. She thinks she's an expert on image. She wants to be everybody else's image consultant, and her natural image is trash. Or maybe she relies on beauty enhancements as beauty replacements. So I've talked about this before. There's a difference between using an enhancement versus trying to cover up your beauty. So I feel like, all women can be beautiful. All women can have some form of beauty, but I don't think that every woman has like a lot of natural beauty. So I've noticed that some women who don't have the natural beauty, they have to wear a ton of makeup in order to feel pretty. She has to wear hella foundation because if she doesn't wear her foundation, then you'll be able to see how bad her skin is. Or, she has to wear the slayed wigs, and she has to spend $500 on raw Indian hair because if she's not, then she feels like all of her beauty goes away. I feel like that's actually a part of the femcel experience, kind of having this anxiety where you're always trying to mask something. You're always masking something. You're always hiding something. Femcells have a problem with masking. They try to mask how undesirable they are. So have you ever met somebody where they try to be loud and ghetto because they just don't want people to realize that like they're unattractive, or, they overemphasize their personality, or they define themselves based on their talents. So maybe they're like a really good singer, they're a really good dancer, they're really good at basketball. They just have to find their identity in something else, and they use that thing. They brag about that because they can't brag on their beauty. Maybe they come from multiple generations of unattractive women. Have you ever met somebody where her own mother identifies as ugly? Her mother grew up calling her ugly. Her grandmother and all of her female family members grew up saying that they were the ugly sisters. So these women come from a culture of feeling undesirable. Maybe they've watched a lot of content that tells them that they're the last to get picked, or they're the last to get married. And, so they feel like they have to rely on these image consultants and stuff. So they're calling into these live streams. Am I pretty enough? What should I wear on the date? If a man dumps you because he doesn't like your dress, he never liked you. If all it takes is you wearing a certain type of dress for him to say, oh my God, you're cut off, I'm blocking you, then ma'am, he never wanted you in the first place. He never liked you. So a lot of femcells, they just have this overwhelming anxiety. Imagine walking around in the world and not knowing if people are staring at you because you're pretty or if they're staring at you because you're ugly and repulsive. That's a very stressful way to live. Most femcells are living their lives under chronic stress. And a lot of them end up comparing themselves to the girls who do get chosen. So the way that you can tell if your friend is a femcel is your friend obsessing over your dating life. Because this has happened to me before. Like, I don't even really talk about men in real life. Because that's a part of decentering men is you don't define your life based on them. So in real life, I don't usually talk about men with my friends. But sometimes I'll come across somebody where they just keep on asking me a whole bunch of questions like, well, who are you talking to? Or what does your ex look like? Let me see a picture of him. Can I see a picture of what your ex looked like? Well, how much money does he make? Or what does he do for a living? So these types of women have a femcel mindset. They also tend to struggle with insecure attachment styles. So whether it's being anxious or being avoidant. So the avoidant femcel, she's the one where it's kind of like, okay, let me reject you before you reject me. That's more of the avoidant femcel. And then you got the anxious femcel who just clings on to anybody. She will desperately sleep with her friends' boyfriends. She'll cling on to random married men. She'll cling on to ugly guys. I mean, she's just a stage 5 clinger in general. But I came across this post online. This is from Lipstick Alley. This girl says, I'm still in my early 20s, and as long as I can remember, I've never had anyone have a crush on me, ask me out, never once felt desired. Now, I've been on dating apps. I get lots of matches and lots of interest, but beyond wanting a hookup, nobody actually wants to date me. In bars, nobody speaks to me. Yes, I've been flirted with before, but it felt patronizing or as if they didn't find me attractive. I've been hit on, but it's never been in a normal way or someone in my age range. I don't think I'm desirable. Even at my highest, lowest weight, who knows? I've always thought I was very pretty, but clearly not. I've been called pretty before, I've also been called ugly. In fact, I've been called ugly a significant amount of times. How do I deal with not being desired? I have no deformities. My features look fine to me. I'm just hideous. IDKY. And the camera shows it. I look disgusting on camera. Why does everyone find me ugly, even when I try to present myself well? So I thought it was interesting how she mentioned that no one in her age range finds her attractive. I think that that's actually pretty common amongst women who are femcells. Because have you ever noticed that, like, they will either go for like super old, super disgusting, creepy men who have no options. Those are the only ones that try to like date them. Or they'll be like a cougar and then they'll try to manipulate these super young boys. It's almost like these women take on the role of being a predator. So she'll be like a predator to like these super young college boys, trying to like seduce them into loving her. All of that has to do with kind of this femcel mindset. So these are the types of women where they're not desired in their own age group. They're not desired in their own generation. They're not desired in their own race or in their own ethnicity or their own hometown. No matter where they go, they don't have any privilege, is what I'm trying to say. They don't experience like pretty privilege. Part of pretty privilege is the guy would want to be seen with you. Like he would want to kind of wine and dine you and take you out and kind of walk around with you and brag to his boys about you, or maybe like put your picture on his phone background or whatever. So women who have this femcel mindset, or they're like the pick-me's who have never been picked, they've never experienced that. And so have you ever noticed that usually the femcells, they actually can't believe when women say that they've been wined and dined. They can't believe it when another woman says that a guy bought her a gift or something, because they feel like that's impossible. You have to be lying. You must be lying about how much favor you get within the male gaze. And what do you mean you can decenter men and then they're still trying to chase after you? That doesn't even make sense. If you're decentering men, it must be because you're ugly like me. That's more of a femcel mindset. Number 3, the femcel is always in a rush. She wants to hurry up and get married, hurry up and get a boyfriend, hurry up and have kids. She feels like she's running out of time. And I've noticed a lot of femcells online, they're always reminiscing about lost time. And then usually if these femcells end up having a baby somehow, like let's say they just slept with some random guy, got pregnant by him and had a baby. A lot of femcells, they end up kind of regretting how they spent their 20s or how they spent their youth. I've just noticed there's this big thing where they have a problem with living in the moment. They can't embrace the moment because femcells tend to be defined by their past rejections. And then they have a tendency to be kind of negative about the future as well. So they're always in this state of dread. They're kind of living their life in regret. And so I've noticed that's why a lot of them, they are obsessed with pretty women or they live vicariously through pretty women. I've also noticed that a femcel's number one goal is to get pregnant by a guy and create a daughter that's more attractive than herself. I have never heard anybody else be so obsessed with having pretty babies other than femcells. It's always the most unattractive women, the women who feel like they're the most unattractive. Those are the ones who are the most obsessed with, oh, I want my baby to have curly hair, or oh, I want my baby to have, whatever the opposite features are of herself. So these women are actually, they tend to be the most desperate to create babies that have opposite features because they're looking for pretty girl validation. So a lot of these femcells, if by some miracle, maybe they do end up getting married, they have a daughter, and then the daughter is really pretty. A lot of these mothers, they will seek the validation of their daughters, or they will try to live vicariously through the daughters. And then as soon as that pretty little daughter starts having a mind of her own, that's when this femcel mother becomes enraged. Because she's like, excuse me, I only birthed you so you could validate me. I only birthed you so you could make me look good. So you can make me look successful. So how dare you, little pretty girl? How dare you have a different mindset? How dare you not act how I want you to act? Number 4, femcells have an external locus of control. They're constantly seeking external validation, whether it's from men, whether it's from female friends. Femcells, they do have a tendency to be attention seekers. Usually their method of seeking attention is by complaining. So I don't know if you guys have heard of the vulnerable narcissist. This is the type of person where they get attention by complaining. Every time you're around them, they complain about how they're sick, their arm hurts, they just went to the doctor, their back hurts. Something's always going wrong. They're always a victim somehow. Okay, I think I'm on number 5. She tries to be the cool girl. So these are the ones who have no boundaries, first of all. These are also the ones who say they're not like other girls. And these women, they're just trying to earn romantic validation. They're trying to earn the validation of men by letting men do whatever they want. So some of these girls, they will pretend to be bi. They'll pretend to be into threesomes or other women or whatever. They do stuff like that because they want the man's attention, not because they genuinely are like LGBT or poly. So I've noticed there's just an extreme desperation to the point where this girl will morph her entire identity into whatever a man wants. Okay, number 6, she has this mindset of, I did everything right. Why didn't I get the reward? Have you ever been around those women? They get super pissed off. I've noticed a lot of church women are like this. I did everything right. I followed the Bible. I stayed a virgin. I stayed abstinent. I stayed celibate. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I'm holy. I'm righteous. I dress modestly. I go 50-50. I did everything right. Why didn't I get my reward? Where's my prize, aka a man? These women become disillusioned because they spend their whole life believing a lie. They've been told that if you could just be good enough, if you could just be enough of a people pleaser, if you could just be holy enough or Christian enough, just be wholesome and virtuous, and then this Prince Charming will just come and pick you up out of the church pews, and then you'll live happily ever after. A lot of these women, I feel like the church is actually a very good breeding ground for femcells. Churches are filled with femcells. Churches will turn you from a pretty girl into a femcel. I just feel like femcel culture is very intertwined with religious culture as well because they have a tendency to shame beautiful women. They have a tendency to shame you for like being sexy in any way. So, you can't wear belly shirts and stuff. You can't wear bikinis and all that. They tend to like look down on that. And so what happens is a lot of these women, they will go their whole lives. They never got the man they wanted. And so then they suddenly have a religious awakening, usually in their mid-20s, mid-30s. Whenever they thought they'd be married, that's when they suddenly go into their religious awakening. So have you ever had a friend like that where she spent her whole life being a pick-me, she never got picked, and so then her last resort is, okay, let me just try to go to church now. Let me convert to Islam. Let me start wearing this hijab, and then hopefully I can use it. It's a form of virtue signaling. If I can't get him with my beauty, maybe I can get him with how holy I am. Okay, sorry, I had to pause it to get some water. But They have this mindset where they're extremely accommodating towards men. Have you ever met a woman where it's like she's a bitch to other women, but then she's a people pleaser with men? Or it's like she's a boy mom. So she loves her sons, hates her daughters, or, that lady in the church where she's really nice to the men at the church and then she's really hard on the women. That is one type of femcel archetype. So this woman has been praying for a husband for decades. She has been like searching for a husband. Every time a new man comes into the church, she starts people pleasing. She starts changing her accent so she can like impress this guy. Have you ever been around that? Like the women who maybe they like black men and then suddenly they start changing their accent into like this black scent, all because there's some black guy that they think is hot. So that's kind of like the church femcel. And then you have kind of like the middle-aged corporate femcels. So those are the ones who wish they could be a trad wife. They really want to be a stay-at-home wife. They've been slaving away at their jobs. I've noticed that a lot of the women who they pedestalize the trad wife lifestyle, they've never been able to rest. They're always working their fingers to the bone. They're always muling. These are the women who are mules. Have you ever heard women talk about that, saying how they feel like they're muling for others? Some of those women, those are kind of more of the corporate femcels. So she's muling so a man could become wealthy. She's slaving away at this company. She's overworked and underpaid in every aspect of her life. She's a pick-me who never got picked. So she couldn't be a pick-me with a guy. Like, she didn't get picked by a guy. So then she'll try to be a pick-me at work. So these are the women where they are mean to other women at work. They hate the pretty girl at work. I tend to call these women basic Betties. So that's another femcel archetype. She's kind of the basic Betty. She's the corporate femcel. She has no value in society, or at least that's how she feels. She feels like she's at the bottom of society. She feels like she never gets noticed. And so the only place where she feels relevant is in the workplace. And then she's hoping that maybe one day some man at that job, or maybe some client, or, some customer will finally notice her and value her for who she is. So this is the type of woman where she used to be a pick-me, she never got picked, and she wasted her youth. She wasted her youth and she's wasting her intelligence away being underpaid. And a lot of these women, they will try to get your attention as the pretty girl. These are the ones who sabotage the pretty girl's job. They want to make your job as hard as possible. They refuse to train you at work. Oh my God, I used to hate these types of women. They would refuse to train me at work. They would not give me a key card. Like one of my jobs, at my accounting job, this bitch literally did not even give me a fucking key card to get in the building. So luckily the janitor was walking by and he was like, "Oh, did you get a key card for the building?" I was like, "No." So I literally would have walked in the following morning and been locked out of the building, just standing outside until somebody else arrived to get into the office. So that is kind of the corporate femcel. Also with the corporate femcel, she is one of the ones who is a stickler about the dress code. She's always complaining that other women who are prettier, she's complaining that these women don't fit the dress code. Like, "Oh, you're not supposed to wear jeans. Oh, well, you're not supposed to wear that. No, her pants are too tight. Oh, well, she's showing too much." She's always obsessed with how pretty women are dressing. And usually the basic Betty femcel, she always wears those slacks where it's like, they look like hammer pants. They kind of look like parachute pants. Because usually she's also overweight because all she does is sit in a cubicle 24/7. The corporate femcels are the ones who, they go to work, then they come home, and then they just eat a whole bunch of popcorn and like chips. Usually these types of women shop at stores like Walmart or like, cash and carry, or like all the kind of cheaper store, or like Costco. She gets the Costco size bags of chips. She gets the family size bags and then she'll eat the entire thing at home. And then she'll come into work and be like, "Oh, I'm on Weight Watchers. Oh, I'm going keto." So the corporate femcel, she's always on a new diet, I've noticed. Usually her hair is extremely damaged. A lot of corporate femcels, their hair is always damaged and scraggly and like it never grows past shoulder length. And it's like, you could have easily grown, like, Bertha, you've been working here for 5 years. You could have easily grown your hair past shoulder length by now. So I notice her hair is always very scraggly and neglected. She's one of those femcels where she's a femcel because of self-neglect. So she wasted her youth, she wasted her beauty, she had no beauty hobbies, she never maintained the beauty that she had. She didn't have a level up strategy. She thought that a man was a plan. She thought that a man was a plan. So maybe she was chasing after men. Nobody ever came to save her. There was no Prince Charming that came to save her and make her into a trad wife. And so she is resentful about how her life turned out. You know, she's 55. She works in a call center in Minnesota. She has to scrape ice off of her car every morning and, drive in the snow. She's got her tires chained up and she's just driving past. Her check engine light is on. She's struggling, only making 60K after working at the company for 25 years. So this type of woman, this type of femcel, she's married to her work because, she tried to be a pick-me. She just didn't get picked for whatever reason. Maybe she was ugly. Maybe her personality was trash. Maybe she just, she always went after these dusty guys or DL or whatever. So she wasted her life away. And then I've noticed the corporate femcel, she hates the young and pretty women who come into the job. Have you ever worked like a receptionist job? Usually corporate femcels, they hate the receptionist. They're always jealous of receptionists. They tend to be jealous of the young, pretty women who are like in shape. They're jealous of anyone who is skinnier than them. They definitely hate women who are young. And most of all, they don't like seeing other women being happy. So I remember one time at my job, there was this one femcel, her name was Faith, and she literally walked up to me and my friend as we were laughing. I'm not kidding. Anytime that we were laughing, she would always walk up and be like, so what are you guys working on? Like trying to basically get mad because we were actually laughing and smiling. So anytime you would start smiling, you bet your bottom dollar, Faith is going to come stomping over from across the hall. She's going to come swishing over. She's going to come swinging her hips, walking down the hall. Well, she had no hips. She just had love handles. She had like the pancake body shape where it's like you have the big love handles and then your butt is like a pancake and it's super flat. She had that sort of body shape. So she would always try to hide it by wearing these long denim skirts that go all the way down to the ground. And it's like, you can't hide it. We can still see the huge muffin top hanging out of the skirt. But she was like the corporate femcel type. So anytime we would laugh, I swear she would just pop up out of nowhere. And then it got to the point where as soon as she walked over, me and my friends started making fun of it. We'd be like, oh, fun's over. Like as soon as she came by. So that's the corporate femcel. The corporate femcel, she is triggered by other women's laughter. She's triggered by women being happy. She gets pissed off if you come into work and you're talking about your weekend. When she says, how was your weekend? She doesn't actually want to know what you did. Because it's just going to remind her that she never spent her weekends doing anything fun. So these women, they kind of got married to their work. Being a pick-me didn't work out for them. So now they want to be a pick-me at their corporate job. Now she's over here kissing the boss's ass. Now she's over here throwing others under the bus so she can hopefully get a couple pennies of a raise. She's trying to save up for her retirement and she keeps on investing in the wrong stocks. Everything in her retirement and her 401k is on the downswing, if she even has it. So she's actually praying. She wants her family members to die so that she could get the inheritance. Have you ever heard of people like that, where they literally want their parents to pass away so they can get either an inheritance or insurance money, or they want to get the house? These are the types of women where they argue with their siblings after the parents pass. They argue back and forth with their own siblings over money. Like literally going no contact, trying to scam their own siblings out of money. That is kind of the corporate femcel. That's the corporate femcel archetype. So we have the church femcels, we got the corporate femcels. And also just going back to the cool girl pick me, or kind of like the tomboy. Have you ever met the tomboy femcel? So she was a pick me who never got picked. She hates all things feminine. Okay, she hates the color pink. She hates dresses. She hates sundresses and sandals and makeup and painting her nails. Anything that kind of represents femininity, the tomboy femcel, she hates that. And these girls they're former pick-me's. They spent their lives trying to get picked by pretending to like football. She memorizes all these fucking football stats. just so she could fit in with men. Not because she genuinely watches football or genuinely likes it. No, this is the type of femcel where she was so desperate to get a man that she wanted to just become a man. That is how male-centered this one was. So have you ever met those tomboy femcels where it's like they've got all guy friends? She has all guy friends. She loves taking pictures on social media with her male friends. She could care less about her female friends, though, but she's always ditching her female friends to hang out with the bros. So whatever the men are doing, she wants to do that too. So she's going to go and smoke with the boys. She's going to go and play football with the boys. She wants to go to the gym and lift weights with the guys. So this type of femcel, she was so entrenched in trying to get picked, she thought that by morphing herself into a man, that she would somehow do a better job attracting a man. I've noticed that the tomboys, they're also very competitive with men. So they try to get attention. They try to get picked by like being better than the man. So for example, she will compete with her guy friends who can lift the heaviest weights. She brags about how much weight she can bench. She brags about how much of an athlete she is. She brags about all the football stats and stuff that she knows. And a lot of these femcel types, if they do end up attracting a guy back in their pick-me times, it's going to be either a DL man or it's going to be just like an extremely dusty man, whereas maybe she gets like pumped and dumped a lot. I have noticed that with the pick-me, with the tomboy pick-me femcels. That does happen a lot. They just kind of, they're the friend, and maybe the guy will sleep with her once or twice, but then he gets irritated by her behavior or something like that. So these girls, they're the very low maintenance types, and they have to announce to men that they're wearing no makeup. I've noticed that with the tomboys. They always want to announce around men that they're not wearing any makeup, and they're just throwing their hair up in a bun. So this femcel, she put in all this effort. She spent all that time growing her hair out. She spent all that time learning about sports. She spent all the time doing the workouts and doing all these bench presses and stuff so she could get a man's attention, but then she still never got picked. These types of women, they always get passed up for the feminine girls, kind of the cheerleader archetype, as opposed to this masculine tomboy archetype. So that's another type of femcel. She brags about watching football and drinking beer, and she brags about how she can drink more than the rest of the guys, and she says that she's not needy at all, but in reality she actually is. And these types, they do tend to be jealous of the feminine women, but she also tends to be kind of like, she looks down on femininity. She just hates anything that has to do with femininity. And another tactic of these femcels is these types of women, they will say stuff like, oh, women are too much drama, or, I'm glad that I don't have female friends because, females are just catty. She refers to other women as females. And, she might sit around smoking cigars or Black and Milds and stuff. And, maybe she vapes or something. And then she just criticizes how females are so dramatic. And she's the type of girl where she always wears tennis shoes. She always wears like those Nike shoes, or like the Jordans or whatever. Kind of like a girl version of whatever's the most popular with guys. That's the type of shoe that she wears. Some of these women will also play video games as well. So, she might start playing video games or getting into anime because there's some guy that she's trying to impress. She tries to get picked by just being like him. She thinks like, oh, the more we have in common, the more compatible we are, which is actually not always the case. You could have things in common with a person, like maybe you both like anime, but that doesn't mean that like you're supposed to be together. So I've noticed this type of woman, she never spends time developing her own identity. She's too busy trying to morph herself into what she thinks a guy would like. Number 5, you got the sugar mama or the provider femcels. Okay, so these are the ones, usually they're middle-aged and overweight, and generally speaking, they do tend to go after the YNs. Okay, so these women, they love YNs. They're always hanging out at like hookah bars and stuff. They're always hanging out at clubs, searching for young boys in their early 20s because it makes her feel validated. So these are the femcels who are like, okay, if I can't get him with my beauty and I can't get him with my youth, because maybe I wasted my youth, Now I'm going to try to get him with my money. So these women, they lead with money. They love flexing on pretty women who are poor. Have you ever been around a woman like this? A femcel woman that calls you broke? Maybe you're like a pretty girl in college or something. And then there's always this random older lady who wants to flex and say how broke you are. And she's constantly bragging about the car she drives and the neighborhood she lives in. And she's a femcel. So she's kind of like a simp. You know how they talk about men being simps? That's how the woman is too. These femcel women, they're basically like simps, or they're like a trick for whatever their type is. Sometimes it'll be this YN type, but other times these women might be a trick for just anybody. She's just desperate. She just wants anybody who's black. She wants anybody who's white. She wants anyone who's tall. Anybody who is a guy with no kids. Just as long as she has somebody, something is better than nothing. That's the mindset of this woman. So she will rack up her credit cards. She racks up her credit card debts. She's always got like the bill collectors calling her phone. So then she tries to hit the do not disturb button so that so that they can't call her. Like whenever she opens her phone screen, you can always see she has tons of text messages from debt collectors where they're like, please click on your bill right now. Click to pay here. She always has that on her phone screen, and then she tries to hide it, so she always puts the do not disturb button on because there are so many bill collectors calling her because she financially screwed herself up by constantly paying for a man. So these are also the women where it's like they let the guy drive her car and, they just give all of their resources to a guy. So the guy's driving her car, the guy is using her laptop, the guy is like, she's buying him lunch. She's ordering DoorDash for him. She's sending him the flowers and stuff like that. So she's trying to kind of buy this man's love. And a lot of those women, they're actually very emotionally vapid and just straight up stupid. Like a lot of those women, they have not spent time developing emotional skills. And it's like, ma'am, you could have at least been a good conversationalist or tried to get a personality or something. But no, all you have is your wallet and a credit card. So these women, they spend up all their money by paying for a man. And also, this is a part of what leads some women into financial ruin. So if you've ever seen a middle-aged or like an elderly femcel, just ask her, what was it like in your 20s and 30s? And then some of them will expose themselves. They'll be like, oh yeah, I paid for a man, or I bought him a house and everything, and basically he left me for the secretary. That's usually that type of story time. Usually she was some sort of sugar mama, or she was like the mule. That's kind of that archetype. So she was like a pick-me. So I just feel like when I talk about the Femcel series, generally speaking, it's a pick-me who never got picked, or maybe she got picked once or twice way back in the day, or like, a long time ago. Her getting picked is few and far between. And so she feels like it's a really big deal to be chosen. So she'll do anything to be chosen. So that includes giving away her money, taking out personal loans so she can keep up a certain lifestyle to try to impress a man. Maybe she's letting a man live on her couch or something like that. She just got a boyfriend. He's already moved in with her a couple weeks in. That's kind of like the sugar mom type of femcel. So she's desperate for companionship. Basically, the guy is kind of like an escort in a way. The woman is desperate for companionship. I've seen a lot of unambiguous women do this with younger, light-skinned, mixed men, or kind of like the pretty boys. I've seen that happen before. So a lot of times these femcels, it may not be based on skin tone, but some of them have kind of a masculine look, almost like this dyke type of look. And then their boyfriend is always kind of this pretty boy. So the guy they're paying for, he's kind of the pretty boy. He's the pretty one in the relationship. So she's paying for his barber visits. She's paying for his haircut and for his Axe body spray and all that. She's getting him expensive colognes, and she's getting him a man purse. Those fanny packs that guys carry? Like the little Louis Vuitton fanny packs and stuff. She's buying those for him. She's taking him shopping out to the mall and stuff. And a lot of those women, kind of these masculine sugar mamas, a lot of those women tend to be threatened by their own daughters, I've noticed. They're jealous of women who are the same age as their boyfriends, because she's got this fear that like the secretary or this young pretty woman is going to steal my young boyfriend. It's almost as if she gets validation from getting the same young men that young women would like. Have you ever been around those types of women? I've seen women like that before. She's kind of like this desperate cougar type. Um, okay, number 7, you got the swirling femcels. So these are women who have always wanted a guy from another race, but she's never been able to get picked for the type of relationship she wants. So maybe she's been able to get fucked, maybe she's been able to get, kind of pumped and dumped, or maybe used and abused, but she's never been able to attain that princess treatment from a YT man. So this is a very common femcel archetype. I've noticed these women tend to resent multiracial women. They tend to resent multicultural women, or just women who are in a genuine interracial relationship. So, it's not fetish based or anything. But a lot of the swirling femcels, these women actually feel underprivileged in society. They feel like they're last to be chosen. And so they're chasing after these white men because they're hoping that some of his white male privilege will kind of trickle down to them. So it's kind of like begging for a social handout. She's kind of begging for status. She wants to ride the coattails of that white man's status, but what a lot of these women don't understand is that every white man doesn't have status like that. Being white in and of itself, that's no longer enough in society. Class and, having money and stuff is more valuable than just being white. You could be white and broke, but a lot of these femcels, they don't understand that. So yeah, they will chase after the trailer trash white guys. They will chase after the wiggas and the scammer white guys, and the white men who are cosplaying and they got the big beards, and the white guys that try to dress like how they think black men dress. So the white guys that wear like baggy jeans and they've got earrings, they brush their beards and all that, and they try to hide their bald spot by wearing like a backwards cap or something. So some of the swirling femcels, they're just desperate for anybody lighter than them. Anybody who is not a dark-skinned black man, that's who they want. And so they tend to be the most jealous if you have like a white boyfriend, or, if you're just casually dating non-black men. That is one of the biggest triggers for femcels, by the way. Femcels don't know what casual dating is. They can't do it. They literally can't do it. They literally, a man doesn't even want to be in this woman's presence unless she's fucking and sucking. So she feels like she has to use her body. She almost has to be kind of like this free prostitute in order to even get attention. And so I've noticed femcels in general, they are shocked when you tell them, oh, hey, I just went out to dinner with John and, he just bought me dinner and that's it. I didn't have to do anything. They're like, what? That doesn't make sense. What do you mean you just ate dinner and went home? What do you mean he took you on 5 dates and you haven't slept with him? What? They can't really understand that because they're used to being abused and denigrated. And so a lot of them get triggered by how effortless it is for you. Even as a woman who doesn't center men, you could be decentered from men and maybe you're still getting free drinks at the bar. This man at the bar has no chance with you, but you're still getting free drinks. You're still getting compliments. You're still getting free tickets to go to the concert and all that. And you are not even centering men. So for a femcel, that is a foreign concept. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.